Sule! After scouring Dragonsteel Nexus 2024 for high-numbered story cards and pieces of Batar, we actually managed to complete the entire story deck set. If you aren't aware, Story Deck is a new con game created by Brandon Sanderson and his team with a fun twist. You can collect almost 200 different cards in hopes of fully completing 3 new short stories. Each story has 54 cards with small fragments of the narrative, and the whole set gives us new canonical stories in the Stormlight Archive. Unfortunately, these cards are a little hard to come by, and if you weren't at the Dragonsteel Nexus convention, it would be pretty difficult to build a full set of stories without spending a lot of money. Because of that, we decided to launch this series on the Story Deck. If you want to learn more about Story Deck, Cosmic Horizons has a great video on the whole thing here. Hey all, a quick but important disclaimer here. Brandon has stated to the public that he wants to maintain the fun of Story Deck for the first year or so of its release, and he's asked that people not share the full text of the stories to the public until Dragonsteel does themselves. We hear this and we want to honor it, but we also recognize that many people just can't afford to chase these cards down at cons or buy them online. So to give everyone a chance at being part of the fun, we're doing these summary videos on each of the stories. These are not replacements for the actual written works, but we do share some fun connections we've made, and we give a pretty comprehensive summary of the plots. If you still want to experience Story Deck the way it was intended, then click off of here and enjoy collecting your story. All right, back to the video. Today, I want to go over Zach and my favorite story from Story Deck.
Get out of here, Lightweaver. Sule! Today, I want to talk about my favorite ELSECALLER in her journey in this new story. The story? ELSECALLER. There will be spoilers for Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, along with some spoilers for the story ELSECALLER, obviously. You've been warned. Please subscribe and share this video if you enjoy. On page 1, we find Yasna after she had been impaled by the Ghostblood assassins in her cabin on Wind's Pleasure. She's bleeding heavily, and Ivory, her Inkspren, is trying to get her to heal herself before she passes away. Understanding the danger of her situation, Yasna reckons her assailants know of her ability to heal, so she plays dead. The Ghostbloods aren't fooled by her act though, and stab her again to finish the job. Yasna's forced to fully Elsecall into Shadesmar to heal, but she intends to quickly Elsecall back to help the crew. As she heals, Ivory warns Yasna of one of the many dangers in the cognitive realm. Whenever she uses her Stormlight, enemies will be. Yes, we get a lot of interesting Inkspren speech patterns in this story, which, if you aren't aware of it, can be quite jarring. After healing and assessing her situation, Yasna takes stock of her now limited Stormlight and realizes she no longer has enough to Elsecall back to the physical realm. Ivory explains that their only way out without Stormlight would be a perpendicularity. Yasna's filled with dread as her Spren explains that their best option would be sailing to Cultivation's perpendicularity, a multi-week journey across the beads to Shadesmar's Sea of Oracles, or the Horneater Peaks in the physical realm. As she starts to weigh her options, Yasna notices the specks of light still floating around her. These represent the people still on the ship, and she quickly forms a plan. She identifies the specks of her crew and finds that they are being held as prisoners. Yasna quickly finds the beads that make up their bindings, and using the Surge of Transformation and the rest of her Stormlight, she soulcasts the ropes into water, freeing the crew to fight. This was, of course, mere moments before Shallan commanded the ship itself to turn into water, dropping everyone into the open ocean. Yasna became furious at Shallan, insulting her intelligence and impulsiveness. Yasna realized she had failed, and now she was trapped in Shadesmar. As she begins pondering solutions, Ivory notices a big problem for their survival. The last use of Stormlight that was used in her soul casting drew the attention of 2 Angerspren. In the physical realm, this wouldn't be anything noticeable, but in their full form, Angerspren are ferocious beasts. Yasna compares them to bloody axe hounds, each with 4 glowing red eyes. They had caught Yasna's scent, and they were coming fast. Rather fatefully, as the pair begin to assess the threat, Ivory notices a light on the bead sea. A boat. Salvation! Yasna grabs the bloody dagger from her attackers, and the pair take off in a run towards the unknown boat. As they run, Yasna catches a clearer glimpse of the Chol-sized black rock creatures chasing her. She weighs the potential danger of facing these beasts versus the potential danger of facing random strangers, but Ivory quickly convinces her to take their chances on the boat. This is where page 1 ends. At the beginning of page 2, Yasna and Ivory call out to the ship. It seems they can't be heard, but just as the two reach the shore, the 30-foot ship with a glowing sail swoops in toward the coast to pick them up. As Yasna wades into the beads, an alien green hand reaches out to grab her, and with seconds to spare, both Yasna and Ivory make it onto the boat. One of the Angerspren catches Yasna's leg on her way up, leaving her with a nasty scratch and confirming the true danger of these creatures. On the boat, Ivory rushes to help a little girl, called Lorietta by the Green Man, steer the ship away from danger. After sailing far enough away from the Angerspren, the group shares interesting introductions. We learn that the Green Man is called Hwin Tivniri. Ivory immediately becomes suspicious of their rescuers and questions the convenience of their rescue. Jasnah concurs. Tivniri shares that his companion Lorietta can see the future, and she knew that they would find people in need at the place and time that they found Jasnah and Ivory. Convenient. Jasnah shares her worries about those who dabble in the future, and though Tivniri shares the same view, he admits that he's studying the girl's abilities. Lorietta was clearly correct this time. Jasnah explains her and Ivory's predicament with the alien humanoids, and Lorietta offers a solution. Cultivation's perpendicularity would be a very far journey, but they could instead sail to Honor's perpendicularity. Honor's perpendicularity is interesting, as unlike the others we've seen in the Cosmere, it moves. This is seemingly at random, and it rarely opens in the same places. Jasnah knows this and thinks it's impossible to track down a random gateway at the perfect time, but then she understands. The girl, being able to see the future, can predict when and where it will open before it happens. Lorietta's visions tell her that the perpendicularity will open for them in a place called Noble Sacrifice. This could be the solution they need, except no one, Lorietta and Ivory included, knows where that is. Hwin says that he may have a lead, but they will need to get to a city. At the end of the page, Jasnah asks about their Stormlight-powered sail, a worthy hypothesis considering that wind doesn't exist in Shadesmar. Hwin is confused at the question. Starting in page 3, Jasnah explains her question further, and Hwin corrects her. The sail doesn't use Stormlight, something he didn't know existed until recently, but instead it sails the current, the first letter in current being capitalized in the story. This is something new to us, and it is a phenomenon in Shadesmar seemingly separate from Honor's investiture. As Jasnah presses for further information on what the current is, Ivory interrupts. It's time for a heart-to-heart. 3 Angerspren are now chasing the ship, and though they aren't closing the distance, the Spren are still keeping pace. They're attracted to Jasnah's anger, and Ivory calls her out for this. Jasnah admits she's still angry at Shallan for foiling her plan to rescue the crew, calling the girl a child. Ivory presses Jasnah, asserting that she's being unfair to Shallan. We see a lot more heart here from Ivory than we ever see in the main novels, considering he rarely shows himself, and he explains to Jasnah the importance of forgiveness. In his choppy Inkspren dialect, of course. After searching her soul, Jasnah decides to forgive Shallan, and as she speaks the words, the Angerspren notably slow their pace. With a slight wave of relief, Jasnah leans back to rest, with her leg wound still bothering her. We fast forward a few days. Jasnah has managed to gain command of the ship. Shocking, right? And she's gathered herself some new supplies. Hwin and Jasnah had spent the past few days collaborating to map out Shadesmar on the side of their ship, filling in parts they knew and leaving the others blank. Jasnah and Hwin start to argue about the location of a place called Emberdark. The name Emberdark may sound familiar to you, as it is indeed the same name used in the title of Brandon's upcoming secret project, Isles of the Emberdark. We have a video all about that project here. We don't get much more insight here though, so back to the actual story. Jasnah learns that Lorietta is from a different planet, one that we may not have heard of before. Though the name is not revealed, Lorietta shares that her people have horns on their head and ride on 2-legged beasts. The girl even has these horns beginning to bud on her own head. Lorietta then shares 2 strange prophecies, one for Jasnah and one for her brother Elokar.
Hey guys, technically the story just says brother, and I have since heard theories saying that maybe Navani's pregnant. So do with that information what you will.
Jasnah's is, you will be on a boat someday, except it will be a lot bigger and you won't be on it. This could be a reference to the 4th Bridge, the massive flying ship from Rhythm of War, or it could be a hint at a future Stormlight novel. Elokar's prophecy is more ominous. Your brother will be like me, but he'll only be half when he does it. I'm not sure how Elokar would be like Lorietta. Is it in reference to seeing the future? This makes me think about the true Spren he was about to bond. Could it have been Enlightened? We know he was likely bonding Design, the Spren that eventually bonds Hoyd, and as far as I know, Design isn't Enlightened. Let us know your theories on that in the comments. Back to the story. Jasnah's told that she will stab a friend in the throat. Yeah, that happened. In Rhythm of War, she has Wit insult Ruthar until he demands a trial by sword. Jasnah volunteers to fight for Wit and immediately stabs Ruthar in the throat. Renarin acts quickly, saving Ruthar with his progression, and Jasnah uses the show to outlaw trial by sword in Alethi law. It seems that all of the prophecies might have come true already, though I'm still stumped about the Elokar one. After a bit more sailing, Lorietta shares her most fateful prophecy yet. We are going to die in Emberdark. Essentially, the crew determines this to mean that if they were to keep their course, they will eventually die, so they have to change course. soon. To close page 3, Huynh and Yasna debate a bit, and Yasna becomes more confused by the man as he continues to drop hints that he's not from this world. During this discourse, Huynh references Roshar as the other half of this section of Shadesmar, likely referring to the physical realm versus cognitive realm. Opening page 4, Huynh challenges Yasna's views of the miracles on her world, and he finally reveals that he's from a different planet than her. His home world is called Relum, a new Cosmere planet! Yasna learns a bit about world hopping here. This is going to be helpful to her in future relationships. And Huynh shares that he sailed from this world through Shadesmar to Roshar. He explains that the cognitive realm connects all worlds in the Cosmere, a foreign concept to Yasna. We learn that Lorietta is not from Relum, meaning we either have yet another Cosmere planet hinted at, or this could be an unexplored section of a world we know. Brandon was inconclusive. Shocker. This little story made of trading cards has opened up so many rabbit trails for later works. Yasna realizes that these other worlds may be able to help Roshar in its war, and postulates that Honor and his enemies may inhabit these other worlds as well. Huynh explains that this planet has no god like Honor, and that the investiture found there has been corrupted in some way. In fact, he didn't even think investiture could be useful in any way until he came to the Rosharan section of Shadesmar. This corrupted investiture could have something to do with the splintering of ambition like we've seen on Threnody. Maybe Relum is close to that system, and his planet suffered a similar fate. Yasna then decides to be a villain. I'm not exaggerating. She goes full Taravangian and justifies to herself that sometimes she needs to be the villain to do what's right. She tells Huynh that he will be coming back with her to the physical realm to explain everything he knows, regardless if he wants to. Huynh tries to argue with her, but that's a bad idea. Yasna dismisses him. He displays visible emotions of betrayal, but doesn't push the subject any further. As the conversation ends, Lorietta shares with Yasna that her good leg would soon match her cut one. Yeah, that's probably deserved. We then get another time jump. After a few weeks, we find the crew at the Sunmaker Mountains, or rather their Shadesmar counterpart, the Salavashi Trench. The crew is only a couple weeks out from the Horneater Peaks, and they've been battered in the process. Countless anger spren have assailed them by now, along with many other inconveniences. As they take stock of their situation, Yasna feels a faint breeze, something seemingly impossible in Shadesmar. This is troubling to the crew, and Huynh shares that it's a Parshendi causing the wind. The breeze picks up from a mere gust, and Yasna knows that the wind rivals a high storm, but it's instead invested with void light. This is where page 4 ends, and I want to point out something funny. Yasna learns about other worlds and the greater Cosmere before she learns about void light. Nice. Page 5 begins with Ivory describing what void light is. He calls it the Everstorm, and Yasna guesses that the Voidbringers will use it to devastate Roshar. This, along with the Parshendi army in the number of thousands, will eventually enter the physical realm through cultivation's perpendicularity. The foreboding storm pushes against the sail of the ship, making it impossible for the crew to sail to the perpendicularity, and yet again, their plans are thwarted. Yasna's anger at the situation draws even more anger spren to further their suffering, and Huynh calls her out on it. Yasna tries to blame him, but quickly realizes, yeah, she's wrong. She's humbled by his calm in the face of her oppressive commands. After finally coming to terms with the situation, Yasna decides to have the crew sail south and attempt to come around behind the new evil storm. After the Everstorm passes the crew, things only seem to worsen. With countless anger spren now on their trail, Yasna's anger was escalating. As she realizes there's no likely end to this vicious cycle, Yasna commands Huynh to land the ship on a nearby island. They have only one choice, one last stand, a fight to the death. As the crew lands on a small strip of land, barely outpacing the anchor spren, they prepare for their final stand. Ivory wields his sword, Yasna her dagger, Huynh a walking stick, and Lorietta a spike. As the battle begins, Yasna puts up a very good fight thanks to her training with Ivory. We learn here that Inkspren are masters of the sword. In spite of her training, Lorietta's prophecy soon comes true, as Yasna's other leg is gashed by an anger spren. Huynh is overpowered by one of the spren, but Lorietta saves him. Using her fortune, the girl can predict where the anger spren will walk, and she places her spike down on its side. In Looney Tunes style, the cosmic horror slips on the spike and crashes into the bead sea, ending page 5. On the final page, all seems hopeless for Yasna and the crew. Yasna realizes her faults. She begins to understand that there's not much difference between her and Huynh. They're both historians trying to save their own worlds, searching the Cosmere for answers. Both are watching over a child with powers they don't understand. The difference between the two, though, is that Yasna was abusing her power, while Huynh was selflessly trying to help her and Ivory. In this revelation, she finally accepts that she was unfair to Shallan. Yasna was mad, but not at her friends. She was mad at herself. She didn't train Shallan well enough. She spent more time planning than she did executing her plans. She assumed her problems were more important than Hwin's, and she took him captive because of it. And then Jasnah realized the key to their problems. She didn't need to forgive the people around her for wronging her. She needed to forgive herself for wronging others. Her predicament was her own fault, and the anger that was festering inside her was completely misplaced. After a tense moment of soul searching, Jasnah truly and honestly forgives herself. She's now free of the anger and bitterness that she had been carrying for so long. The anger spren immediately stand still. They were no longer called to Jasnah's anger, and with nothing else drawing them, they retreat. The crew, battered and half alive, return to their vessel. Jasnah and Ivory help the wounded Hwin onto the ship, and Jasnah decides to let him go, even without the information she so dearly desires. Hwin and Lorietta had helped enough. Jasnah and Ivory part ways with their alien companions. They would have to find their own way home. Right then, Honor's perpendicularity opens on the shore, revealing the familiar sight of rock buds on the other side. Home. Jasnah's noble sacrifice fulfilled Lorietta's prophecy, and it clicked. No one had heard of the place called Noble Sacrifice because it had yet to be named. Jasnah names the small strip of land, and with a fond goodbye, Jasnah and Ivory enter back into the physical realm, only to be greeted by Hoid. Jasnah demands answers from Hoid. How did he know they would be there? He jokes with her, of course, but at the end of the story, he agrees it's time to share his knowledge of other worlds. It was time for Jasnah to learn about the Cosmere. Wow, this story is fast-paced fun the whole way through. When Dragonsteel releases the full story, I highly recommend you read them, as again, this video is no substitute for Brandon's writing. We learned about 2 new Cosmere worlds and saw fortune used in a crazy way. Could Hwin's planet have been devastated by the same thing that scarred Threnody? We hope to learn a lot more about these guys in the future, but this was a fun look into a deleted scene from Words of Radiance. If you want to learn more about this awesome universe, make sure to subscribe. Kolo?